Let's look at dealing with collectors. Now, you may be in here and you're not in financial trouble, but a percentage are, and this lesson is certainly for them. For some of the rest of you, you know someone that's behind, and you often enter into these situations where you hear about collectors doing things they're not supposed to do, and I want to educate you for that reason, because I think the power of the marketplace can cleanse this industry that's out of control. And so I teach you with that in mind, and I want you to have information, because those of us that have information have power. Knowledge is power in a knowledge-based economy, and that's what we're sitting in. And you may have a relative, you may have your 82-year-old grandmother being abused by some collector, and then you'll know how to handle this situation. It's very powerful. I'll show you what I'm talking about. The best way to pay debts when you're behind is with a plan. Planning is wisdom. So ignoring it, throwing it all in a pile somewhere, if your bills look like me scattering these across here, then you're disorganized. No wonder you got a problem. Get organized, develop a plan, take control of what you can take control of if you're behind on your bills. And we'll walk you through how to deal with the collectors as you do that. And you got to remember, when you're dealing with a collector, this is not your friend. Sometimes one of the techniques they use is the friend technique. They want to be friendly. And they're not your friend. They have one purpose for talking or dealing with you. One purpose: get money. That's their whole purpose. They don't care about any other part of your life. This is not your counselor. This is not your pastor. This is not your mama. They want your money. Don't be naive. And they play all these games. They want to hear your whole story and all this. Every bit of this is a technique. This is a big, big industry and a sophisticated industry, and you have to have a clue when you deal with it. Don't be intimidated by these people. Collectors are basically trained salespeople and telemarketers. That's all they are. They average about 20 calls an hour. That's the norm. They contact out of 20 calls about 6 debtors, and they'll usually get about 2 promises. They run about a 10% promise ratio, and out of those 2 promises, I have no idea how many of them are fulfilled, but I bet most of them aren't. Smart Money Magazine says the collections industry, in terms of revenues produced by fees paid to collectors, is now over $40 billion a year. This is a big, big business, and it is a very sophisticated business. But the people that are calling you are not very sophisticated. It is a very high turnover, low paid position. You're dealing with an idiot in a cubicle 500 miles away with a headset on that has not been on the job very long. A recent article in Business Week said that 85% of the collectors are gone in a year. There's an 85% turnover ratio annually. That means they're not going to be there long. When you call back and they say George isn't here anymore, they mean it. George isn't there anymore. That's one thing that's not a technique. He is gone. He left. Why? Because I'd rather do just about anything in this job, wouldn't you? I mean, really, you just about go anywhere else than do this. It is not an honorable profession. It's out of control. So if you're running a collections outfit, really what you're running is a bunch of mean telemarketers that aren't going to be there long. What you do is hire and train full-time to replace the fallout because the attrition level is so high. The front door is a revolving door. They run in and run back out all the time. And that's who you're talking to. This is someone who couldn't get a decent job. And so don't act like that this is somebody that's like if I loaned you money and it was you and me, or you loaned me money and I didn't pay you, now that'd be personal, and if you were angry it would mean something. But this is an idiot in a cubicle 500 miles away with a headset on. Keep this in mind when you're dealing with them, because they start to have this presence in our lives. Big, round, one single eye in the center of the forehead. And it's just these monsters are out there. And these monsters are maybe about this tall, sitting in a little chair, spinning around like the movie Office Space. I mean, there's just nothing there. You have to take the teeth out of these monsters and deal with this properly in order to do things. Now, because there's such high turnover, they're not very well trained. They get a couple of training classes, and they're taught basically one big technique. Several little feeder techniques off the one central core technique. The core technique is they're taught to evoke strong emotion. If they can get you on the phone and change your pulse rate, they got you. That means that they made you afraid, they made you angry, or any other emotion that is a strong emotion that you want to name. Usually those are the two big ones, fear and anger. And they're best friends, aren't they? Because right about the time I get afraid, I usually get a little angry. And that works together, doesn't it? They are really good at pushing your buttons. They'll use all kinds of techniques. One of the techniques is the pull the rug technique. The pull the rug technique is this. You step up on the rug, they pull the rug out, right? Now, the way that works verbally is they call up and they say, George, you're behind with us, and we can't believe it. Now tell me what's going on. And George says, well, so the kids have been sick, I've been laid off, we had a car wreck, my wife is in the bed in traction, and he starts telling the whole story of why they're behind on their bills, and about 3 or 4 sentences, 5 sentences into it, the guy yells into the phone, I don't care what's going on in your life, don't you know you owe this money? When are you going to pay this bill? And you go, wait a minute, I was just... And it gives you mental whiplash, doesn't it? And what happens is people get mad. It makes you mad. It's step up on the rug, pull the rug, and he was just asking, and then I answered, and then he started yelling at me, and it makes you mad. Because he didn't care about your situation after he acted like he cared. It's a verbal barrage. It's psychological warfare. It is a technique. And these guys are really good at their techniques. They're so good at it that they really create all kinds of problems. I was doing a live event one time in Phoenix, Arizona, and this beautiful lady came up front and she said, thank you so much for teaching this lesson. I was teaching this lesson there. And I said, why? What's going on? And she said, well, I'm current on everything, but I haven't eaten in 2 days. Because my dad told me, no matter what, I always protect my credit bureau report. It meant everything. And I went, you haven't eaten in 2 days? I'm afraid of those collectors. They call and yell. Yeah, but you haven't eaten in 2 days? She said, I will now. See, they use all kinds of techniques. Now, there is a spectrum of collectors. Let me be very, very clear, because sometimes I get criticized legitimately for not detailing this out enough, and I want to make sure I do. There's a spectrum of collectors from really professional good ones to just scumburgers. Okay? And it works kind of like this. The best people in collections that we work with, the classiest, that know their stuff, that do not violate the law, that walk through the process, are people collecting on your first mortgages. You get behind on your first mortgage, they're going to call you, and when they call you, if they say they're going to shoot you duck, the bullet's coming. If they say something, they mean it, and they don't bluff, they don't fool around, and we're going to move you into foreclosure. They're going to put pressure on you. They'll be firm. Sometimes they'll be a little mean, but they are very professional at their business, and the turnover rate with mortgage collections is not nearly as high as it is in other things. The next best collector is usually your small town local collection agency. It's owned by someone in your town, and they're collecting bills for local merchants in the area. And again, they're usually more professional, and they're your neighbors, so they know they're going to see you somewhere. And they may get hit when they do if they don't behave. I mean, so, there's a process. But I've dealt with a lot of those men and women that operate those things, and they're very good to follow the law, the Federal Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. They don't violate federal law very often. But then you move along, and it starts getting worse fast. Okay? And you can really get in some disastrous situations where you deal with like these little finance companies, these little storefront finance companies. A lot of the people that work in those are basically punks. And you will find that out when they start to collect from you. I had a single mom call me one time crying. She was at the corner market on a payphone that I was counseling. And she said, I tried to go home, and when I got home, he was sitting there. And I said, what do you mean he was sitting there? This bozo was sitting with a folding chair in the front of her driveway so she couldn't pull in the driveway. He's trespassing. Call the police. Tell them you're being threatened physically. This is a punk. Out of control and violating federal law. The worst of the worst are credit card collectors. Chase, First Card, Bank of America, Discover, Sears, Pennies. I'm saying it on tape, so it must be true. Bad news. These household names, companies that otherwise we generally have some respect for, when you get to their collections department, violate federal law daily. They're completely out of control. They're credit card collectors. You can tell they're lying if their mouth is moving. If you're a credit card collector, you are officially scum. And if you don't like that, come see me. We'll talk about it. You're scum. We work with you every day. You have no clue what you're doing. You're out of control, and you're abusive, you're mean, you're wrong, you're nasty. You're an industry that needs to be completely purged. And we're about the business of doing that as fast as we can. We're going to do it.
The company I work for issues credit cards. It is a major credit card issuer. There's an in-house collections department I worked in. There was a front-end collections department that handled, that's where I worked between 5 and 90 days past due. There were probably about 200 or 300 people that worked there at any given time. A lot of turnover, because because hardly anybody, sticks around after training. The people who are a penny past due, they would get a $29 late fee, and their interest rate would also increase to approximately 25%. That was the default rate at that time, 24.99%. There was one person on the floor who was a more aggressive collector. Nothing was ever done about her because she made the company look good, or she made the department look good because she brought in a lot of check drafts, a lot of post-dated checks, and that's what they like to see. It's unfair business practices, and what she was doing, she was lying to the customers. They said, anybody you know who is treating people like this, we want their names. And so I gave them her name, but they never did anything about it. I don't know why they asked about that. Management sat right there. They heard all of the phone calls. They know what's going on, and they just don't care. At that point, every day I felt like I was working for the devil. Like I was coming in and working for the devil. 9/11, it's just one of those times, you never forget where you are, what you were doing. And I was there in collections, collecting on accounts, and then some of my coworkers came in and said, and told us what was going on, and we're like, oh my gosh, so we all just stopped. We looked, and our manager called a meeting, and she says, look, she says, I know what's going on, but we still have a job to do, so still get on the phone and collect. And we're like, what? How can we do that? I sat there and pretended to. I wasn't going to do it. And another woman sitting next to me was crying because she says, I can't do it. And she was doing it, and she was getting screamed at, yelled at, of course, and by debtors, and like, what are you, what's wrong with you people? And it's like, I wondered what was wrong with my manager telling us to keep collecting when 3,000 people were just murdered,
They do stuff like they'll change their names. I used to have one when I was going broke that would call me, her name was Mrs. Baskerville. The Hounds of Baskerville. This is her pseudonym, right? Now listen, let me be real clear. I am not, nor have I ever in my career taught someone how to dodge a bill. If you legitimately owe someone, I want to help you get on a plan and pay it. But I don't want someone taking over your life by misbehaving, reprioritizing your life, and you walk up here and haven't eaten in 3 days. That is wrong. Now, I want to walk you through a process where you can pay the bill and you can be honorable and you can have integrity. I am not going to assist in you dodging someone. That's not what this lesson is about. This lesson is about an industry that's out of control and how to put some shields up, some barriers up, so you can breathe while you work your plan to pay the people you owe. That's what this is about. We're not about dodging it. And the best way to counteract this technique of emotion is to always pay your necessities first. Then you set the order of payment after that. Necessities are food before you buy anything else. If you're working at all, you can buy food. Lights and utilities. Keep your heat on. I'm not talking about a $148 cable bill. I'm talking about your water, your electricity, your gas, so you have heat and cooling in your house. Basic telephone service. Not a $92 a month cell phone bill either. That's not what I'm talking about. Basic utilities. Necessities. Food, utilities. Pay your mortgage payment. Do not pay anyone until you've eaten, kept your lights on, and pay your mortgage payment. You have to have a place to live. Pay your car payment if you've got a car, and keep gas in the car. Food, shelter, clothing, transportation, and utilities. Usually if you're in a mess, you've got enough clothing to make it for a little while. You don't have to budget much for clothing. Usually you can hang on to that one. But take care of those things, because here's the situation. If the lights are on and you've got a roof over your head and your car is running and you don't have to worry about the water being cut off, you emotionally are in a completely different place to fight your way through this, because you're in the middle of a battle. And if you put those four walls up around you, you've got that emotional guard, and now the rest of it is a Monopoly game that I'm behind on. Act, the Federal Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, was passed also in 1977, dictates how a third-party collector is to deal with you. But subsequent case law has impugned this act upon debt collectors, meaning if you owe Bank of America, they have to abide by this act now because of case law. The original act just said if they hired a third-party collector, it dealt with them. But now that same set of laws has been impugned on creditors doing collections on their behalf. If you own a business and you're collecting, you need to be aware of this act because you don't want to violate it when you're doing collections. One of the things is harassment is illegal, and it restricts a collector to calling between the hours of 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. And that is your time, not where they are. They may be on the West Coast. You may be on the East Coast. And then they want to call and wake you up at 6 o'clock in the morning, or vice versa. They want to call you in the middle of the night. And that's not how the act works. It's your time. They have to go by where you're located. And if they violate that, they're in violation of federal law, and they do violate it every day. So be aware. The Act also allows you to demand that a creditor cease calling you at work, and I recommend you do this. This is another area of emotion that you need to get off of you. The embarrassment of being called out in front of your coworkers through your receptionist. You need to get that off of you. You send them a letter. A copy of the letter is in here, and you need to send it certified letter, a certified mail, so you have proof they got it, because they'll act like they didn't because they lie. Send it certified mail, and it says, according to the Federal Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, you're no longer allowed to call me at work because I have now notified you that my employer wishes you not to do that. That's simple. And then while you're at work, you can work, and while you're at home, you can talk to them when they call us according to the guidelines I'm going to give you. We're not trying to ignore them. We're not trying to dodge them. We're going to make them abide by the law. It's that simple. The Act even allows you to insist by letter that a creditor stop all contact except to notify you of lawsuit proceedings. This is called a cease and desist letter. That letter is also in the back. I do not recommend, let me say it again, I do not recommend you use a cease and desist letter except in extreme situations where you have a collector that is completely gone bananas, is threatening to kill you or something, and they do all this bizarre stuff. Then you need to put a cease and desist letter in place. But if you put a cease and desist letter in just because you don't like to be bothered, you will activate stuff in their collection software and you're more likely to get sued, is what we're finding. If you keep messing with them the way I'm going to teach you to mess with them and work your plan, allow a certain trickle of communication, and you owe them that, you owe them money within guidelines and within a reasonable amount, you need to communicate with the people you owe money to, but on a reasonable basis. If you'll allow that instead of putting up this cease and desist, you get to continue to work through the thing. If you throw that cease and desist up, it'll activate some of the algorithms in some of the collection software, and it'll go straight into the lawsuit dumper, and you might have been able to keep it out of there for a couple of years if you didn't do this. So I recommend against using that. Do not use the cease and desist letter, except in horrible situations, because all negotiations stop and you may activate a lawsuit. Now, what you do need to do is this. You need to say, here's the situation. I'm going to have a calm, adult-like discussion with you as long as you don't use inappropriate language, inappropriate tones. If you're going to yell at me, call me names, call my mother names, or threaten me, you're going to talk to a dial tone. I will talk to you once every 2 weeks, no more. If you call more often than that, you will talk to a dial tone. If you talk to me in reasonable tones, I want to communicate with you. I will talk to you once every 2 weeks. And if you want to test me on this, just call right back. Because some of them, we had one lady the other day, had 16 calls before noon from one collector. Now that's harassment. No question about it. That violated the law. And if she takes that one to court, she'll win it. The problem is broke people don't take many people to court. That's the situation. So you've got to just lay down the guidelines. You're going to talk to a dial tone. They call up and start, your mother's a dog. You know, you just have to just teach them a lesson. Do not talk. It's only been 13 days. You're only allowed to talk to me every 14. See you. And just put it in your database, you idiot, because they database everything. Every call and every reaction is database, because if they ever find one that works, they hit it over and over and over and over again. If you're Southern, you may get a Northern accent, because that may be abrasive to you. If you're Northern, you may get a Southern accent, because that may be abrasive to you. That anything they can figure out that pushes your button, they're going to database it. So you can teach them with their little database how to behave. Once every 2 weeks, no more. I will talk to you then. If you will talk to them that often, and you will send them as much mail as they send you, showing them a copy of your budget and the forms I'm getting ready to show you, you can bother them more than they bother you. That's a different way, isn't it? Because they don't know what to do with that one because everybody ducks them. So once every 2 weeks, and I'm going to send you lots and lots of mail, make you open a lot of stuff and look at it, make my file get really, really thick. Oh, that's the old thick woman file, yeah.
Hey Dad, I have a question.
Okay.
Wouldn't it just be easier to file for bankruptcy than having to deal with like the constant harassment and the nightmare of all the credit card companies?
Well, certainly filing for bankruptcy gets rid of all that nightmare, and it cleans it up. But most things when you live successfully require you to go through some short-term pain to get the best long-term result. And what you would get if you file bankruptcy is you get this short-term release of the pressure. And yeah, you don't have anybody bothering you anymore, you don't have any debt, you don't have any payments, everything's cleaned up, right? But the long-term implications are what kill you. Chapter 7 bankruptcy stays on the credit bureau report for 10 years. So you get ready to go get a mortgage, it's going to be a problem. You go get a cell phone, it's going to be a problem. And even some places when you get ready to get a job, they're going to pull your credit bureau report to see what your electronic reputation looks like. So you want to get a job like at a bank, you're not going to get one if you file bankruptcy. They don't want bankrupt people being bankers. I mean, that's how that works. So because you've messed yourself up long term, it doesn't make it a good plan because you're going to, that year from today to 10 or 20 or 30 years out, it's a lot longer than from today till Friday and putting up with the pressure. So if you go through a year or two that's really painful, it gives the rest of your life a whole lot better life than if you say, I'm going to just, in order to get some quick relief, this instant short-term thinking, that then you lose the ability to win long-term. Plus, for the rest of your life, if you fill out an application, none of the applications for jobs or for getting licenses for different things like a securities license or an insurance license or a real estate license or a mortgage broker license, all of those kinds of things when you fill them out say, even loan applications say, have you ever filed bankruptcy? It doesn't say have you filed in the last 10 years or the last 7 years, it says have you ever? And if you fill that out incorrectly, you could cost yourself that whole relationship because you lied. And so since I filed bankruptcy, I've got to fill that out that way the rest of my life. It is like a brand. It's not a good thing to have on you. So, one thing you got to remember is it's kind of like saving money. Saving money on the short term is painful, but it doesn't really seem to gain me anything. But long term is how I build wealth. All people who win in any area of their life think long term, and they're willing to suffer a little bit short term to have a better long term result. People who live mediocre, average lives always take the short term gain and give up the long term in order to win. So while it feels good at the moment, it's a bad idea. No collector may take a bank account or garnish ye wages without proper lengthy court action, except the case of a delinquent IRS or student loan. All such threats are a bluff. They'll get you on the phone, the credit card collector, we're going to garnish you your check Friday. You know that check you were supposed to get Friday? You're going to get there, it's not going to be there. You're what? Oh, no! Oh. People call me, they're just going bananas. They're not going to garnish you your check. It's a total lie. They can't. They have to sue you. They have to win the lawsuit. They have to wait 30 days and execute on the judgment. And all of that's going to take them months and months and months and months. They're not taking your check Friday. That's a lie. And to threaten to take your check Friday when they know it's a lie is also a violation of federal law, and they do that every day. This is an industry that's out of control. So will they sue you? Someday if you totally ignore them and never pay them. And they probably should then. I want you to get to them and pay them. That's not the point. But this idea they're going to threaten you into giving them your food money has got to stop. And they'll use the emotion stuff. I remember one time we were going broke, and American Express called my wife. Started yelling at her, and she's a sweet little Southern belle, and she doesn't do conflict. Said, Ms. Ramsey, I just can't believe you'd stay with a man that wouldn't pay his bills. She called me at the office, and she's crying, and she's like, he said, oh, I wouldn't believe he'd stay with a man that wouldn't pay his bills, and I was kind of thinking the same thing. I got so angry. Just exactly what they wanted me to do. totally fell into the trap. I got so angry, I didn't pay the house payment, and I paid them off. It was $1,100. It was $1,186. I remember it 20 years later, that's how angry I was. It's so stuck into my emotions. It's $1,186. And I owed them 2 cards. I had that one and another one, a corporate card and a personal card. And they databased that. And 30 days later, the same guy calls up. My wife answers the phone. By now, I'm starting to understand these techniques. And I taught her, I said, Sharon, this is what's going on. They made me mad, and I fell for it, and they hurt your feelings, and he pushed a button right where he knew you were. They totally won that. We can't let them win. And she said, all right, that's just, and then she kind of got mad in that Southern Belle kind of way. And he calls up and he goes, Miss Ramsey, I can't believe you're still there. I thought you'd be leaving. It worked. Why not push the button again? That's how this works. And she said, listen, just don't get your briefs in a bind. We'll pay you later. Now, the IRS and student loans do not have to go through a court action to garnish your wages. The student loan can garnish your wages just by sending, the federal insured student loan, just by sending your employer a letter, and you are garnished right then. Just like that. And they do it all the time when you get way, way behind. So if they threaten, that may be a real possibility. IRS, they just appear out of nowhere and take everything. And it's all legal, go figure, I don't understand. But your plan should include as much prompt repayment as you can, and don't let them use your credit report as a paper club. We're gonna mess up your credit if you don't straighten this up by Thursday. Well, by the time my credit was completely obliterated, because I hadn't paid like 900 different accounts on time, right? The credit report ran from here to the end of the stage, it was all bad, right? This guy calls up and goes, we're gonna ruin your credit. And I went, oh, please, don't ruin my credit. No, not the credit. Don't ruin the credit, please. It's just hard to be emotional about it at that point. And besides that, we're talking about a FICO score. If you're going to quit borrowing money, it really doesn't matter much anyway. Now, I don't want you to go destroy your credit. That'd be silly. But don't let them beat you up with that threat either and cause you to give them what would have been your children's food money. It's crazy.